Broadcasting from Studio A here at Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs. It's time for the Gardening Simplified Show with Stacy Hervella. Me, Rick Weist, and our engineer and producer, Adriana Robinson. Well, as Vincent Price would say in the thriller, darkness falls across the land. The midnight hour is close at hand. No, I'm not talking about Halloween. I'm talking about the end of daylight saving time and the growing season. Oh boy. Today, Little Shop of Horticulture. I was thinking about you the other day, Stacy, because I have a neighbor just down the road, and she has a Stacy Halloween Nightmare yard. Not on Elm Street, but on my street. This neighbor has a yard full of Agapodium goutweed, vinca vine growing all over the place, and chameleon plants.
Not the chameleon plants.
Yes, all three. I watch her fill a little bucket of Miracle Grow and go out there
She
on a
fertilizes them?
Oh,
That's
yes.
the scariest part.
Yes, I know that.
Is there barberry?
Scare you right out. There was no barberry.
Is there wind chimes?
There are wind chimes.
Okay, got me.
So 4 out of 5, something like that.
It's a true nightmare. There may be some barberry in the backyard that you just haven't seen yet. So
I'll check it out. Are you decorating in your yard or landscape like many people do for Christmas? Americans are expected to spend $4.2 billion on Halloween decorations, decorating their house this year. And many people, the number of people decorating their homes has continued to increase. Some displays look so elaborate, people have had to call the police. And I have a neighbor down the road, not the same neighbor with Stacy's Horror Landscape, but a neighbor down the road that decides to put up Christmas and Halloween at the same time and just get it over with.
Oh, my.
Yeah, so it looks like the holidays threw up in their yard. It's just crazy.
The whole Halloween yard decorating, I mean, it's fun. Don't get me wrong. I don't begrudge anyone their fun. But it is wild. It came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you used to put some pumpkins on your porch and call it good. And now, I mean, people start decorating in September, and they have to get their money's worth because they're spending so much on these displays. And, I mean, they are really fun to see, but wow. I mean, it's, in some ways, it's like more than Christmas decorating.
It's unreal.
Yeah. And where do they store it all?
That's always the big problem. Where do you put those things? Well, invasive plants and invasive bugs are a big contributor to Halloween horror stories and the Little Shop of Horticulture. Now, I do want to mention something right off the bat, and we have some pictures for our YouTube viewers, Stacy, but at this time of the year, I get real melancholy and sad based on the fact that I don't get to see that bright yellow color of green ash trees in the landscape.
Yeah.
Because of emerald ash borer, many of our ash trees are gone. And I'm chilled by the lack of that bright color in our neighborhoods, our parks. Green ash had ecological and cultural significance in our landscapes. Streets lined with green ash trees. They made baseball bats, bowling pins out of green ash. I really, really miss that tree. And you'll see some here and there where they're struggling to survive or growing out of the base of the plant, sending out suckers or shoots. I've got some pictures to show you in a parking lot that I went through the other day. Stacy, I miss that tree, and emerald ash borer is one of those Little Shop of Horticulture things that I'm dealing with personally. It's horrifying to me.
They are. And, you know, what they did to trees all over the Midwest is really genuinely horrifying. But where my in-laws live out in the Detroit area is literally just a few miles from what was ground zero of the emerald ash borer invasion here in Michigan. And it's interesting because ashes are coming back because they ate everything. You know, so the ashes took care of everything that they could eat in the area.
Extinct.
Yes.
It's
and so they have then moved on to new areas because it's saying, hey, there's nothing for us to eat here. Better move to West Michigan. And now that is giving ash from seed, because it does spread pretty significantly from seed, and other ones that were just significantly weakened, a chance to come back. And there are actually some quite large ash trees now around there. Now, that doesn't mean they can't come back, but but there is this kind of sequential or succession of ash and emerald ash borer that maybe they will be back. Now, we're behind the Detroit area because we didn't get it as early as they did. But maybe in a couple years.
Yeah, I agree.
Your ashes could be back.
I agree. And that's why I took pictures of these trees, because they're also seeking out some of these trees that seem resistant to emerald ash borer to develop cultivars for future generations.
Well, that's exactly what happened with the Dutch elm disease and the bark beetle.
Exactly. When we talk about Little Shop of Horticulture, of course, one of the things we've talked about this year in our show is that area between the street and the sidewalk and what in the world to do with it. Some people call it the Hell Strip. Some people call it a parkway, a boulevard, a right-of-way. I'm planting some liriope and some creeping thyme in mine. And for folks who are watching or listening to the show in the South, remember also here in the North, we suffer from something called snowplow disease in winter. So that is an area also that creates problems. Many plants we could talk about in our show on Little Shop of Horticulture. Stacy, you know one that I can't stand is stinging nettle.
Oof.
Some people love it for the health potions that they can create out of it, but I get intense burning and an itching sensation. Low-grow sumac. Now, you'll see that growing in island beds at stores and parking lots because it's super tough, but I made the mistake of putting it in my landscape, and they call it a fragrant sumac. It smells awful.
I don't know if I've ever really smelled it. What's it smell like?
It's just pungent. And it's kind of like Russian sage on steroids.
Oh.
It's bleh.
So it really ran and spread, and it's one of those plants that it's suckering.
Yeah.
And if it's happy, it'll sucker and colonize, which is perfect for parking lot beds, but maybe not so much for the backyard. So that's what's happened to yours.
Right.
Huh.
So
in that
I'm
dry
yanking
soil.
it out. I'm
All right.
pulling it out, but the whole time I'm pulling it out, I'm like holding my nose. It's awful. Opuntia or prickly pear cactus. I love prickly pear wine. I love Opuntia and prickly pear cactus, but those pads are so innocent looking. You get close to them and you get those stickers in your socks, in your gloves. I was watching some deer eating them. I'm wondering how in the world can they eat those pads?
They must have been real thirsty.
Oh boy, those.
Well,
are
I have to say, I don't think that our native Opuntia humifusa, the one that grows out here, the glockids, which are the little teeny tiny hairs that are the most irritating, because you can usually avoid those big long thorns.
Right.
It's the little tiny ones that get you. They're not as bad or as long lasting as like cactus that you'll find in the Southwest. They provide a temporary irritation. But, for the most part, they're not that bad. Yeah. But the thing that I find about them, at least in my garden, they need a lot of management. They really overgrow. Mine have started spreading from seed, which, as you can imagine, is simply delightful. We deadheaded ours this year to prevent that from happening. Because, you do not want to be weeding and come across a little cactus seedling in your vegetable garden, which I did have one there. The other thing about managing this plant, talk about horror stories. We're always really careful about what we do with it and make sure that we put it in thick bags in our trash and not the yard disposal, because I don't want, the poor person who takes away that garbage disposal to get an unpleasant surprise.
Right.
So it also has to be managed carefully, not just in the garden, but for other people to deal with.
Oh, you're right. You're right about that. Well, on today's show, we're going to talk about some plants and some invasive issues. I've got things on my list like calorie pear, dodder,
Real horror show.
bindweed, all of these things that have to be part of our Shop of Horticulture Hall of Fame. Here's a terrifying thought. Rick at your doorstep. Rick or treat. Yeah, today's Rick visits your doorstep. Caution with me may behoove. I see a plant in your yard, I disapprove. While you're busy doling out candy, the distraction I'll find handy, in darkness the plant to remove. If there's a weed in your yard, I'll pluck it. Take your treat in my bag, I'll tuck it. My costume likewise, you may recognize. I'm the guy wearing a 5-gallon bucket.
You are on a roll, Rick. A roll.
Thank you very much. Yeah, on Halloween, I go out there wearing a 5-gallon bucket. It's ideal.
Okay.
Just drill some.
Oh, it's a mask. Gotcha.
You drill some holes.
I was thinking
in it.
like a full body 5-gallon bucket kind of costume, but. Oh, you are in. I didn't know you were such a Halloween fan.
I don't know. I just Little Shop of
Horticulture. You're feeling the spirit. I like it.
I can't wait for Plants on Trial. That's coming up next here on the Gardening Simplified Show.
Boo! And greetings, gardening friends, and welcome back to the Gardening Simplified Show, where we are opening up the Little Shop of Horticulture. Everyone's always like, oh, Seymour Feed Me because of, the famous movie. Yep. But that's not really that scary. I mean, they didn't make it very scary.
It's not scary.
Yeah, but thank goodness there's not actually plants like that. Of course, there are carnivorous plants that eat insects, but they are not ever going to harm you personally. So anyway.
And there's always barberry.
There's always barberry is indeed scary. You can scare me with many things in the garden. Stinging nettle, I also have a big major issue with. Very, very big reaction. And no one ever told me about stinging nettle, right? So I'm working as a landscaper in college, weeding, and all of a sudden, like, what the heck just happened? And also those stinging caterpillars.
Yes.
You're hearing a lot about those these days. So, but not to discourage you from gardening, because all you have to do is learn a little bit. And that's what we're here for, is to kind of teach you some of that stuff, help you, make you aware of those things so you can avoid them, whether that is an invasive plant or a pest or a bug or, whatever that scary thing is for you. We all have our own fears. But, last year, there was quite a bit of talk going on about Gothic gardens, goth gardens, goth gardening. And, those words just got thrown around. And I realized that probably a lot of people don't really know what that means. Like I grew up in the 80s and 90s when goth, people dressing like goths, was the subculture, was a thing. Like we knew what that was. But some people who are older might not. Maybe even some people who are younger might not. And that got me thinking, where did that goth term come from? So, of course, I looked it up because this is what I do. So the original use of goth goes back to the term Gothic, which was a tribe of Germanic people in the 4th century.
Wow. Now,
the Romans did not like the Goths and considered them uncouth and barbaric. And so to some extent, you could say, okay, well, like Dark Ages, that's where the association with darkness comes from that. But then fast forward to the 12th century, and we've got Gothic architecture, which plenty of people are familiar with. Of course, Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris is one of the classic examples. And that actually had nothing really to do with the Germanic tribe of the Goths. It just kind of came out of nowhere. Then fast forward to 1764.
Okay.
So we're up, another 400, 500 years here. And Gothic takes on yet another new meaning. In this case, the first Gothic novel, which was Horace Walpole's book, The Castle of Otranto, which later got the subtitle added, A Gothic Story. And that gave birth to the whole subgenre of Gothic novels. So, of course, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier is a classic example. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley is another classic example. So it was kind of this mysterious, sometimes supernatural, freaky, scary, but also darkly atmospheric, taking place in creepy labs or abandoned mansions or castles and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, and if you're keeping score at home, that's Otranto. I thought it was a typo. I thought it was supposed to be Toronto. It's Otranto.
Yes.
Okay.
The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole. If you would like to spend this spooky season reading the first ever Gothic novel. I have not read it, but I find it sounds like it's very interesting. So I think that is really where this idea of the goth subculture comes from, is more of the Gothic novel, dark, creepy, staying inside. But what really characterizes the goth subculture is wearing black, like dressing in black. Oh, yeah. So Rick may be a goth. We'll explore this in a future episode. But that's what it means. So when we say like a goth garden or a Gothic garden, what is generally meant by that is plants with black foliage, or plants that kind of have this looming presence. So it can mean a lot of different things. So in celebration of today's Little Shop of Horticulture, I wanted to share my top picks for Proven Winners Color Choice Shrubs for goth gardens.
Fantastic. Let's hear them.
Okay, so my number one quality, and this is the easiest one, is black foliage. Because, that's a very common thing. Now, you could, because black foliage has been so popular for the last, 15 years, 20 years or something like that, there's tons and tons of options. Everything from annuals, vegetables, perennials, shrubs, even trees. If you wanted to plant it, tulips, yeah, exactly. If you wanted to plant an entirely black flower and foliage garden, you actually could.
Yeah.
And if you did, please let us know because we want to see it. That sounds pretty amazing. But black foliage is just one way you could think about this. You could also go for plants with creepy, gothy names. And like I said, other plants with a looming silhouette. One plant that I always think of, and when Lisa Roper from Chanticleer was on, she talked about it a little bit, about the big weeping spruces that they have around the ruin garden at Chanticleer that kind of look like ghostly looming presences around the garden.
It's weeping beech.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely a good creepy plant. So, black foliage, center stage crepe myrtle. Now, this is an interesting one.
Beautiful.
It is beautiful. And most crepe myrtles are considered southern plants, and the tree forms definitely are, because of course they can't die back or you would not have a tree anymore. But center stage is a shrubby crepe myrtle, which is actually hardy down to USDA Zone 6. It can die back to the ground and it will just come right back up and flower. And this has some of the darkest foliage out of any crepe myrtle out there. But what's cool about it is it's not like goth and brooding all season long. It blooms in summer, and when those flowers come out, it just takes on a totally different character. Now, I personally like center stage red, and I think that probably is the most goth because it's combining that black with that red. But we also have center stage pink and center stage coral. And they're really just beautiful plants that I think because of that, they're long blooming and have that colorful flower. They don't just kind of suck the life out of the landscape, which can be a risk of black plants that they just kind of become a black hole or they blend in with the soil. The other thing about it, it is very resistant to powdery mildew because there is nothing scarier than a ugly crepe myrtle covered in powdery mildew. No one wants that. Now, our jazz hands variegated loropetalum. This is a really cool plant that is looking so beautiful right now. It is a variegated loropetalum. Of course, if you live in the South, you also know this plant. Dark purpley black foliage, but the new growth on this is variegated with white and spots of purple and pink and black. But it's also not like a festive party. It still has, I think, some like very goth kind of vibes to it. It's not overly happy, so don't worry about that. Kodiak Jet Black Durvilla.
Love that plant.
Some of the darkest foliage that has ever been introduced on a Durvilla. And what I love about this one, much like the center stage crepe myrtle, in summer it has these bright, bright yellow flowers. And they're small, but the contrast when those are out is just so beautiful. Also, I love black and yellow because I like really strong contrasts like that. Black hat rhododendron.
You gave me one a few years ago. I planted it in my landscape. I love that plant. That has become a favorite.
Yeah. So do you have it planted where you can set off the color, or you just
There's hosta and there's the Hakanakloa, yellow Hakanakloa near it, and that is just gorgeous.
Love that. That is a great combination. And then I was thinking, we don't really have anything yet. We will have a butterfly bush coming out in 2027 with near black flowers. But right now we don't have anything with super moody, gothy flowers, with the possible exception of wee bit grumpy hydrangea. And this plant, it got its name, I think I've talked about it before, because one of its trial codes was among the seven dwarfs. So each of the plants in that trial group had a name from one of the seven dwarfs. This one was grumpy. It made us laugh every time we looked at it, so we kept it. But in the right soil conditions, so acidic, cool, the flowers turn some very, very moody dark purples that are really, really cool. Moving on to, we've got, of course, the Weigela, Wine and Spirits, which also has the benefit of a creepy name. Midnight Wine Shine, which is probably the blackest of any Weigela. And Sonic Bloom Wine, which is a reblooming Weigela. So if you just want to be like a little goth with the black foliage, but you want some nice flowers in there, it really splits the difference. And then kind of to end up, I think that Laced Up and Black Lace Elderberry are really the ultimate goth shrubs in our collection.
You bet.
So they have really dark black kind of lacy foliage. But once that first frost hits, the foliage kind of does this thing where it just kind of droops on the plant. So it doesn't fall off right away. It doesn't turn color, but it kind of droops and it's got like immaculate abandoned mansion vibes.
Yeah, awesome.
Really, really a cool choice. So if you were looking for Halloween vibes or goth vibes in your landscape, there's just a couple of suggestions, but of course it's always about using your imagination and making it work for you. But be sure to tune in on YouTube so you can see what all of these plants look like. In the meantime, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're opening up the mailbag. I don't think it'll be too scary, but you never know what lurks inside. And welcome back to the Gardening Simplified show, where Adriana just scared me half to death with some wind chimes. You know, again, it's to each their own, but when you live in a windy neighborhood and your neighbors have wind chimes, it's hard. It's hard to get some rest, and that's scary.
Unbelievable.
Because I can be pretty scary when I don't get enough sleep. But anyway, it's our time to answer your gardening questions. If you have a gardening question that you would like us to answer, you can always just visit us at gardeningsimplifiedonair.com. There is a contact form there. You can just send it right in. There's even a place to attach a photo, because there's nothing scarier than trying to identify a garden problem without a picture to tell us what the heck is going on. And you can also just leave a comment on our YouTube version of the show. Adriana reads all of those and responds to them and tells us if there's something that should be answered on air. So lots of different ways to get your questions answered. And we're kicking this edition of Mailbag off with a question for Rick. So Rick's expertise is requested by Melissa. I heard Rick talk about his leaf mulching machine. Can you describe what that is, and did you make it yourself? Why do you grind leaves instead of leaving them as is? I'm also curious about creating my own compost and mulch. Can you please describe the best formula? I know you have to mix the browns and the greens, but I'm not sure how to start on my own.
Wow. Well, okay. So we're referring here to the what I call the churninator. So this all started a number of years ago when I recognized that leaves were super important in my landscape in fall, and they were free, and I wanted them because of my Dutch heritage. But they decompose so much more rapidly if you shred them up. And that's what we do in the lawn. We get a super sharp blade for the lawnmower, a ninja type blade, and you can grind up the leaves into fine pieces and not have to rake them up. Because like my good friend Neil Sedaka said, raking up is hard to do. So we use a lawnmower and shred the leaves finely, and the turf can handle it and not be matted. I thought, well, this is going to work well in the landscape. So I got myself a garbage can, a weed whacker, some safety glasses, and I'm out there churning up these leaves. I went on an online site, and you can take a look at it on YouTube. Adriana's showing you the video right now that I put together of the churninator in action. It's loads of fun. It's entertaining. I entertain myself out there, and it just shreds these leaves, and they make the most fantastic mulch for my garden. Or if you wanted to put them in a compost bin, yeah, they're basically decomposing quicker. You're speeding up the process by tearing them to shreds.
Right, increasing the surface area. That makes them decompose more quickly. You know, that reminded me, I did complain a bit about windy areas and wind chimes, but one of the benefits of living in a windy area is it tends to blow all of my leaves away.
That's true.
And I don't usually have to do very much raking or leaf removal because nature kind of just takes care of it for me. Hopefully they end up, you know, down in the woods somewhere and not in a neighbor's yard. But Hey, once they blow away, I don't know what the heck happens to them. I wanted to talk about Melissa's questions about creating compost. And we've talked a little bit about this without ever directly addressing it. But, the basics, you can read, there's whole books written about compost. But ultimately, composting is really just kind of managing the conditions that allow a natural process to take place so that it happens more quickly and that you actually get a usable product. Because all organic products, which is to say anything that comes from nature naturally, are going to decompose eventually. But some things like oak leaves can take an extremely long time because they're very, very
the
thick.
Tannins,
And the tannins and all of that. But when you are composting, you want a mix of greens, which is to say fresh material. So it doesn't necessarily literally need to be green. It's just something that's fresh and juicy. And browns, and the browns are going to be dry material. And by combining these in a rough proportion of 1 to 2, 1 part green to 2 part brown, which is so much easier said than done, because it seems for most of us we have no shortage of greens and a major shortage of browns. But again, when I've composted, you don't need to don't be out there with like a scale or a measuring tape or anything like that. It's, you mix it, you layer them down, continue to layer, keep it moist. That is what I have always found is the most crucial. And then once you get it kind of up to the top of your bin or whatever, then you can start mixing it and mix it every once in a while. And eventually you'll have compost. How long that takes depends on the weather. Of course, it's going to happen much more quickly in warm weather than it's going to happen in cool weather, although you can compost all year long. I have found, I think my number one tip though, would be that you are never really going to get compost if you keep adding to the same pile, because then you're always going to have bits of fresh stuff in there. So it really is best, if at all possible, to have 2 separate piles, one that you're actively adding to.
That's smart.
And one that's actively, rotting, because I've tried it and, you go to get it and then you got like a big squishy old tomato or pepper or something nasty in there. So it's really best to have one that's rotting, one that you are continuing to add to.
That's good advice.
And then compost and mulch are interchangeable.
Yeah, I've learned a lot from you through the years. And last week you said something that I thought was brilliant, and that is set aside some browns for winter. Because I'm always putting my broccoli scraps, vegetable scraps into my composter. And but I don't have in winter. I don't have the browns, so I think. That
reminds me. Someone did say, I don't know if it was on YouTube or they wrote to the show. I don't recall, but someone did share that they tear up paper grocery sacks. Oh, because we were talking about how it used to be.
There you go.
That they used to just recommend newspaper, and there was no shortage of newspaper. Now there is a massive shortage of newspaper, if indeed you can even find one. So they tear up paper grocery sacks to provide some browns. So
while you were talking about the leaves too and shredding them, in my neighborhood, as long as we have this scary show, I have 2 neighbors who are feuding.
Oh, no.
And when the leaves have fallen off the trees, if one of the neighbors leaves the house and leaves his garage door open, the other one will get out his leaf blower and.
Well, that's not very nice.
I know, but the wind did it.
Wow. And you're witnessing all of this?
Yeah, from my living room, I'm sitting there having a.
This is like a real rear window kind of situation. We had another question that I thought was also very timely from Lily. Great name. I'm in USDA Zone 9A, and I like to transplant my roses from their planters to the ground this fall. They still have leaves. Should I prune them before transplanting? And if so, how much should I prune? So
absolutely prune them. It's going to make it easier for you, right, Stacey?
There's really nothing scarier than transplanting roses.
Right.
I mean, I've been saying that about a lot of things this show, so forgive me. It is the Little Shop of Horticulture. But transplanting a rose is totally one of those easier said than done things. Now, I think that you can prune if you want. You don't really have to worry about it. But I have to tell you, my approach would be to not prune them before transplanting, solely because, or at least not majorly prune them, because if you have more to work with as you're trying to dig them out and move, that often makes it a little bit easier than if you've kind of cut them down to, just a few inches or whatever. Then, you really have to kind of work with very little. And if you cause damage then, and you have less of the plants, then you're going to have to prune that off anyway. So my general approach would be, yes, it's okay to prune, but I would typically save the pruning for after it's done. And what I would do when you got all those unruly canes going all over the place is use some rope or an old pair of tights, although that's going to be a little bit tricky on a rose, but just like a durable rope, put it into a ponytail. And then gather that all up. So that will help you get closer to the plant. And then that provides something that's much easier to move. You can't do that if you cut it back to little stumps. So this isn't really a plant health issue. You're absolutely free to prune them, and pruning and transplanting often go very well together because no matter how careful you are, there's always some root loss. So it's good to compensate with a little bit of loss from the top. As well.
Interesting. That's what I do with my ornamental grasses when I cut them back, is I'll use the rope, tie them in a tight bundle, and then chop them off at the base.
So much easier than trying to get in there and that, because that's a tough job too. Yeah. So yes, it's totally up to you. I think this is going to be a your mileage may vary type of situation where it's going to depend on the rose and how big it is and how flexible it is. But usually if people are planning to prune and transplant, I recommend giving yourself, obviously you need to sometimes prune stuff so you can actually get into it, but give yourself the margin of error of leaving the plant intact for that transplanting process, and then go ahead and do your pruning once it's in its new home. So that's just one approach, but again, this is not a plant health based reason. This is a convenience in transplanting based reason. So thank you both for your questions. We're going to take a little break. When we come back, we are going to be continuing a very scary conversation about creepy crawlies and weeds and all that scary stuff. So stay tuned.
Welcome back to the Little Shop of Horticulture. Stacy, we could probably do 3, 4, 5 shows on this, because thinking about it, for example, someone could say, you haven't mentioned poison ivy yet. And is poison ivy the worst thing growing on planet Earth? Some people would argue that. Maybe it's a harsh assessment. As far as summertime problems go, a bad case of poison ivy competes with horrible sunburn, a swarm of black fly and mosquito bites, or how about the ubiquitous European paper wasp that loves to congregate under your deck, your patio furniture, and when disturbed, packs a punch. There's all kinds of weeds like bindweed. I call that frankenvine is what I call it. And there are different types of bindweed. There's a hedge bindweed, and then there's one that's a relative to the morning glory family called field bindweed. And this thing is a real problem, and I think we have to take our cues from the agriculture industry, and that is bindweed can become a real problem in fields, and the problem that it creates, Stacy, is not necessarily the aesthetic issues, but its root system is extensive, and it sucks a lot of water out of the ground, and if you have a year like we had this past year with drought and heat, can create some problems.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest issues, and I'm certainly guilty of this well before I was in horticulture school, but when I was working as a landscaper, you're out there, you're weeding, you're like, oh, a wild morning glory, how lovely.
Yes, exactly.
Because the flowers do look very much like a morning glory, and so if you have this in your yard and you're weeding, you might be inclined to say, oh, this is perfectly lovely, I'm going to leave this go. You should not. You will regret it. Not to mention that by letting it go to flower, you're just going to get more seeds to spread more. And that is the really scary thing about weeds is they're very, very successful at spreading and growing. So look up bindweed. There may be different types of bindweed that are native to your area, and know what you are dealing with so you don't just think that you have some special wild morning glory popping up in your yard.
Yeah, some people refer to it common name as devil's weed or devil's guts. So
ew, gross.
Be
That's
careful.
pretty scary.
Yeah, it is. How about dodder? It's an annual seed-bearing parasitic vine. Now, more of a problem in the south than it is, let's say, here in the north or with our Canadian friends. But this is, one of these parasitic type vines. It's fascinating how it will, the seeds will fall to the soil, and then when the growing season starts, it starts to grow and it tries to find something to latch onto. And then once it does, it abandons the roots and basically sucks the life out of the plant that it's consuming. dodder. It's an annual seed-bearing parasitic vine. That's got to be in the Shop of Horrors.
Oh, absolutely. And I distinctly remember the first time that I ever encountered dodder, and I freaked out.
Yes.
I mean, it's
weird.
You're envisioning sort of everything that Rick just described so well, but what Rick didn't mention is that it is this bright yellow orange color. So it's not green.
Right.
It is this weird bright yellow orange that looks like something that like dropped out of some sort of alien ship or something. And yeah, I remember, so I was working again as a landscaper, going way back here to all of those old times. And we had this little kind of bed at the entrance to a subdivision or a condo development or something like that. And it was all planted with, annuals. And one time, we came there to do our annual, our weekly or biweekly weeding or whatever. And the whole bed was covered in this orange spaghetti looking thing.
It's crazy.
It happened so fast, because we were doing relatively regular maintenance. Adriana's going for her phone because she's got to get the mental image. So if you need the mental image, be sure to check us out on YouTube.
Yeah, and Stacy, let me quick mention, if you're keeping score at home or you're in the car listening on the radio or podcast, Dodder.
Yes.
Dodder.
Cuscuta is its scientific name. Adriana has a big frown on her face because she just looked up the dodder, Cuscusta. So it's kind of a fun scientific name. But yeah, so then it makes these little suckering structures that it attaches to the host plant with. They're called Haustoria, Haustoria. And yeah, so they aren't just using the plants as structure, but they literally make these little mouth-like structures that directly connect to the plants, and they are literally sucking the xylem and connecting to the xylem and phloem and sucking the water and sugar out of the host plant. And yeah, once it is established, it totally disconnects from the ground. So you can't even trace this thing back and find a place to pull it and sever it. If you had dodder in a bed, then I would honestly just recommend that you take out everything that's in it. And I would use a pre-emergent in that bed, even if that means that you couldn't grow something that you wanted to. And of course, a pre-emergent is fine as long as you're not trying to grow from seed. Dodder is a true annual, so you don't have to worry about the plant returning. But as a weed, it does put out a ton of seeds. And yeah, you don't see it often here, but you do see it. So
yeah, the plants are weakly photosynthetic, more so, as Stacy mentioned. The Haustoria basically just tap into the plant's vascular system.
Yep, and they just suck the juices right out like a barnacle or something.
I've got a hot take controversial plant in my shop of horticultural horrors, and people are going to be upset with me. Marigolds. But again, remember, I come from the garden center industry. I have handled hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of flats over the course of my lifetime. And when you've handled 52,567 flats of marigolds and you smell like them, you do not like marigolds. Hardy, I had to get that in.
All right, fair
You
enough.
had your wind chimes, I got my marigolds. Hardy orchid broadleaf helleborine. Drives me crazy. And then we've got to mention, for a lot of people, especially on the East Coast, Northeast, are dealing with spotted lanternfly. And this thing is an invasive species that has spread to 18 states in the United States. Key areas that have been affected are Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, Delaware, New York, Virginia. But it's moving along. We're waiting for it here in Michigan to appear. And this is an invasive insect that will basically do damage to all kinds of plants, but loves the tree of heaven.
Yep, Ailanthus.
And Ailanthus is another Shop of Horticulture horrors. That tree is.
It is.
So I got to mention it.
No, and that's good to mention, because now, especially if you live in an area, well, maybe it's not a good idea to remove any Ailanthus if you don't have spotted lanternfly yet, because then that just means they're going to eat your other stuff as soon as they arrive, and they're like, wait, what? No Ailanthus?
Right, exactly.
Better go eat your Japanese maple, because maple is one of their favorite other foods, and when they can't get the Ailanthus. But yeah, and unfortunately, it's just a matter of time, because they one of the main ways that they spread is if you take a nice road trip to an area where there is spotted lanternfly. They love to lay their eggs on cars.
Yeah.
And so that is one of the ways, it's not just a situation where the insect itself is just flying and, moving its range a little bit here and there. Humans are actively playing a part in spreading it by, accidentally transporting the eggs.
And in that adult stage, they don't necessarily have to fly. As a matter of fact, they like to go for a walk. They take a walk. So if you're out there on the patio in summer and you've got one, you're sweating and they're crawling up the back of your neck.
Have you seen one yet? A spotted lanternfly?
My daughter has described in detail to me what it's like to sit in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when she was living there. Oh, my word.
I have not seen one yet. I truly dread the day when I do. But yeah, anyone I know on the East Coast is just, saying horrible things about, how they're just ruining your ability to sit outside, and they conglomerate. So there's bunches of them. But
Yuck.
At least when there's a lot of them, you can, kill a whole bunch at once with like a fly swatter. So get to know what they look like, so if they do reach you, what they're actually quite pretty. Yeah. I mean, I hate to say that about them because they are so destructive, but they are quite lovely.
We've got to include on the list, and there are hundreds of plants and invasive species we could include, and we're going to have to do an additional show on this. But I got to make sure to throw in here calorie pear, good intentions, got out of control. It's one of the first trees to bloom in the spring, covered with white flowers that have this objectionable foul smell to them. Some people say they smell like mothballs or ammonia or whatever, but it just doesn't smell well. The tree grows at upright angles with weak crotches that break with age. And of course, Stacy, the problem here, this plant has become highly invasive and crowds out native species.
Oh, the invasiveness on this plant is really out of control. I mean, if you drive pretty much anywhere, at least I can speak for the eastern half of the U.S., anywhere in the spring when it's in bloom, you don't really notice it too much when it's not in bloom. But when it is in bloom, you just see how utterly widespread it has become. And this isn't as simple as just saying like, oh, hey, I'll just take my little trowel with me on a hike and, dig up any invasive species. I mean, you need a chainsaw to manage this invasive species, and that is dangerous, scary.
You got it. Boy, what a scary show. Maintain your composture. We're here for you in coming weeks, and we'd love your questions and your comments. Send them to us. Remember, we're on YouTube, podcast, and radio. Thank you, Stacy.
Rick or Reet.
Oh, Rick or Reet. Rick or treat.
Rick or treat, everybody. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Adriana, and thank you. Have a great week.